So diplomacy has its logic. So if you go back to, let's say, when President Trump took office, when he took office, right after inauguration, he had a series of executive orders. One of those orders was putting additional sanctions on Iran. And the video is available for anybody to go see. It's a matter of public record that he said, look, this is not what he wants to do with Iran. He wants to have a deal. And he even invoked the phrase, I want to make Iran great again. And he said, but I'm told that I need to do this, but this is not what I want to do. So what basically his idea was, I'm going to cut a deal. Now, a deal is a bargaining process. And we saw that there were, conversations going on from January, let's say late January, early February. It takes a while for the actual formal, discussions to take place, even behind the scenes. But the process lasted several months, and it became clear that the Iranians are not willing to budge on U.S. demands. So when one side is not willing to budge, the other side has to, if you will, change gear. So you get up from the table and you say, okay, I'm going to now use force. I don't want to use force, but I'm compelled now because we're not reaching an agreement. It's not like they can go back home because in a bargain, it has to reach a conclusion. Either it's a settlement or it's conflict. I mean, that's just the logic of how states operate. And so you saw the 12-day war in June. And right after the 12-day war, he actually came out, and he was coordinating this with Israel because we know that we know of the three airstrikes, that the three facilities that US B-2 bombers struck during that time period. And afterwards, negotiations resumed. And Mr. Abbas Araghchi, the foreign minister of Iran, is on record of telling Al Jazeera that we were having conversations before the 12-day war, during the war, and afterwards as well. And so that process continued. And then from the late June all the way to December, there were conversations going on back and forth. And that conversation was disrupted by the protests that broke out in December 28th. And that resulted in the regime killing several thousand people. And that put the negotiations in a very tough spot because now the president is looking at it and saying, does he have more leverage with the Iranians because they're now under domestic pressure as well as international pressure? Will they now, agree to the terms? And the other thing is, it's politically risky for the president to be negotiating with a regime that's killing its own people. But he set that aside. We had another three rounds, one in Oman, two in Geneva, and they still were not budging. So the perception shaped on the US side is that they think we're bluffing, that, they think that, oh, the 12-day war is something that it's something similar will happen and we'll absorb it. We don't have to give in to these demands. So that means that the United States has to escalate. And that's how we got here. That would sort of venture into conspiracy theory, so I don't want to go there. I mean, I look at imperatives and constraints and the facts. What is the imperative of Israel? The imperative of Israel is defense for the state of Israel. And you see everywhere, whether it's with Hamas, Hezbollah, whether it was, the Iranian and Shia militias in Syria, Iraq, the Houthis, Iran itself. The Israel is a small country, and as a small country, it only has so much influence and so much power. It obviously is an ally, a very close ally and partner of the United States. And there are places where the US and Israel's interests converge, and there are places where the US and Israeli interests diverge, and that's very natural. And so it's not like the United States is on the same page. But yes, uh, from an Israeli point of view, it wants to be able to neutralize this regime because it sees it as an existential threat. The United States does not live in the region. The United States is far away. but the US has interests in the region. And therefore, uh, you see the convergence of those interests where those lines, converge. But they're not always on the same page. If you look back at the 12-day war, the Trump administration, President Trump personally intervened for the ceasefire after 12 days. He did not want it to continue. And he used some very strong language in front of the press. And so he said the same thing to Prime Minister Netanyahu in the case of Syria. You need to make a deal with the Syrians. You need to make a deal with the Turks. The United States is the interest is that it is retrenching from heavy responsibility for global security management. It wants allied and partner nations in each region to take up that responsibility. In this region, which is the most volatile region of the world, you have Israel as an ally, you have Turkey as an ally, and you have Saudi Arabia. Those are the three pillars, major pillars, and then of course there are second-tier countries like Egypt and Qatar and UAE. But these are the three pillars. So the United States is trying to put up a security architecture. That's the U.S. interest. That means that you cannot have this conflict spreading. As for Israel, Israel isn't interested in spreading the conflict because it has no interest in making the region that it lives in very fragile, because then it means that it will have to do way more for security than its capability allows. Already the Israeli military is stretched thin because you have an operation, massive operation in Lebanon against Hezbollah, the deployment in Gaza, the deployment in the West Bank. You have deployment in Syria. You have to make sure that you are prepared for Houthis. And then this war is going on. So the Israeli military is maxed out. It does not want more chaos. What it wants is a weak Iran. Now, obviously, Iran is not going to sit back. Iran is going to retaliate. So this is Iran's actions. These are the unintended consequences of striking at Iran. So this is the logic of war as opposed to any actor's subjective preferences. And to the point that it basically weakened its domestic economy at the expense of this very aggressive posture in the region. Look, it was not the United States that turned against Iran after the revolution. It was the Iranians who started to say, death to America. It was the Iranians who broke off diplomatic relations, who kept 52 diplomats hostage for 444 days. It was the Iranians who cultivated Hezbollah and that attacked US Marines in Lebanon. So this isn't new. This is a long-standing conflict that's been going on. And it's not as if, okay, we just need to look at this current moment. Uh, at the end of the day, international law has limits. And so in reality, states do what they have to do. It's not what they want to do or, any subjective preference. States mostly behave because they are operating from scarce resources, limited information, and massive threat perceptions. The reality is, as I said earlier, Israel is a small country with a small military, and it can only defend itself. And even that, as I pointed out, they're maxed out. I mean, there are limits. No country has unlimited power and resources. And Israel is no exception to the rule. Second of all, Israel is very much aware of its own limits. This operation against Iran would not have been possible for Israel if the United States was not there. So what was the most that Israel could do on its own is the 12-day airstrikes. Okay. And those were limited. They didn't cause a whole lot of damage. They were not threatening the regime. I mean, the regime lost a lot of people, lost a lot of air defense sites and production facilities and nuclear facilities and whatnot. But there are limits to what Israel can do because it has a small air force. It needed the US. This operation needed the United States. And therefore, I don't think anybody who's talking about a greater Israel is talking about an ideology, but not reality. Uh, what's really happening is not even regime change in the classic sense of the word. Uh, When I say regime change, everybody has the model, and of course, justifiably so, of Iraq and Afghanistan. And that's not the model here. What the model, and I've been writing and talking about this since this latest war began, is that we're looking at a variant of the Venezuela model, where you remove certain irreconcilable elements, but you do not remove the regime because you do not want to have vacuum and chaos. So what is happening is, and the president made it clear yesterday when he said, I don't think Raza Pahlavi is a guy that can actually lead this country. I mean, the son of the Shah. But whereas Israel has been promoting him, and there are elements within the United States close to the president who think he is the right person. But the president's decision is he's not. And when asked who's going to take over, he said, there are people. We want somebody from within. We want somebody who at least has some appeal to the masses and can control the situation. Look, this is a big country. It's a country of 93 million people, and it is the size of Alaska, an entire American state. So there is no way that the United States can essentially sort of say, okay, we will topple this regime and then build a new one. You can't do that. We've already seen that with Iraq. We have already seen that with Afghanistan. President Trump is on record of having always criticized those wars. Hence the idea of not having forever wars. But that doesn't mean you have zero war. War is a necessity and you use it as a scalpel when it's absolutely necessary. And it's not just the United States that does not want Iran to have nuclear weapons. Every single regional state does not want Iran to gain nuclear weapons. Turkey certainly does not want. Saudi Arabia does not want it. Pakistan does not want it. I would even say China and Russia don't want it because this is such a dangerous thing in the hands of a regime that behaves this way, that is so ideological, that represses its own people, and it is responsible for the death of countless people in Syria. I mean, look at how they support Hamas, because of which Palestinians suffer. Like, why would you want to support Hamas that would do an October 7 attack that would then result in the death of 70,000 people? Who's responsible for that? Yes, of course, the Israelis retaliated and they attacked, and it was their retaliation that led to those deaths. But who started this? I mean, on October 6th, all those people were alive. And so this is the problem here, that I think that the regime change is not on the cards. What is that rejiggering of this regime. You eliminate certain people and you keep the regime in place or parts of it and hope to modify it over time. Look at Venezuela. Delcy Rodriguez is now president. She was VP for Maduro. Every single person who was with Maduro is still there. They haven't removed. I have not heard any reports of anybody being removed from a key position. And the United States is moving on. And that's the expectation here is we're not doing regime change in that classic sense of the word, but the regime has to be modified. I mean, terms are misleading. That's the problem with language. So, yes, the regime has been evolving, and not just because of the killing of Khamenei and top military leaders and other elite figures. This regime has been fragmenting for a long time. I wrote a report for our institute, the New Lines Institute, back in April of 2024, showcasing a evolutionary regime change process that's been in play for at least 15 years, if not more, where different factions are, struggling, jockeying for power. And if you will, inflection point that I identified was the succession to a new leader. And now, at that time, I did not know that Khamenei would be if you will, eliminated, assassinated, and taken out in this way. My sense was that either he will pass because he's old, or, they won't wait for him to pass and they will have, front load a succession. And those factions were jockeying for power. And most of those the two major factions are the IRGC, which is itself internally divided, and then the regular armed forces, the Artesh. Artesh has been gaining ground, and IRGC has been weakening. And we saw that in 2024 with the regional war, with the collapse of the IRGC's regional strategy. And then last June, when the top brass, at least a dozen top commanders, were eliminated in that 12-day conflict in the very early hours. So IRGC has been weakening. So, yes, this process has been going on. And I think what the US is doing is giving it a bit more momentum. Because if you eliminate, the principle here is that if you eliminate those who are hawkish, those who are highly ideological, do not want to change course, then there are those inside who are willing to change course. Okay, because they don't agree, they don't like where their country is going, that it's under sanctions, that they are having to kill thousands of people because they're protesting. I don't think all the commanders in the IRGC or the police force are doing this happily. They do it because it's their job. Some of them are very ideological and have fealty to the idea of Islamic revolution. But there are a lot of people for whom, this is not going well. So this cannot be sustained. So they are prepared to make changes. And I think that that is the strategy here, to leverage pre-existing internal fault lines so that you bring to the fore people who are willing to negotiate in good faith and get out of this situation. Now, is that easy? Absolutely not. This could all go wrong, and the president himself acknowledged that just yesterday when asked, what are the risks? And he said the risks are you would end up with somebody worse. So he's mindful of that. He is also mindful of his political clock. He has the midterms coming up in November. His poll approval ratings are low and they're dropping, and he doesn't want them to drop further. There's only so much play he has, so he doesn't have a whole lot of window of opportunity here, and no actor would want to go and deliberately just do something because there's a lot of talk. Oh, people criticize that, maybe he's quote idiotic. I mean, and we hear this not just for Trump, but for leaders everywhere. People casually throw these things out. What they forget is that political actors are very sensitive about their interests. And that's one thing they will pursue. Will they miscalculate? Of course, that happens all the time. But nobody deliberately does like a blunder, if you will. A blunder also is a very complicated outcome. It happens, but it doesn't happen with a snap of a finger. It takes time. I don't think that they just got shocked. I don't think that they were caught unaware. I think this was had to be planned. There is no way the United States is going to do something like that and not take its allies into confidence. Just look at the behavior of the Saudis. Look at the behavior of UAE. They're not expressing any shock. They're not, panicking. The Turks are actually on the front foot, and they're basically saying we're going to need to manage this. They want to get involved in sort of the post-conflict scenario, because for them this is an opportunity to expand their influence in the region, and they know that when as the U.S. retrenches, because Iran is the unfinished business. Okay, if you look at the globe, every region has some unfinished business before the US can hand over the responsibility to regional states. In Europe, it's Ukraine war. Here, it's first was Gaza, and then Iran is sort of the unstable element in the region. In the Far East, you have to reach an accommodation with China, and there's issues of Taiwan and the Philippines and whatnot. So this is what's happening here. The Turks are looking at this as an opportunity. So I think everybody knew this was coming. Everybody knew this. They were being prepared, getting ready. They were prepared. They were made well aware because it's not like, you just tag team with Israel and just start this one day and everybody's like shocked. No, that doesn't happen. They do. Does everybody? Do they know exactly what will happen? No, but it's not like they're caught off guard. They were taken into confidence. They were told the risks. I mean, the president came out in advance saying, we're going to expect casualties. We're going to lose good people in this conflict. So I don't think that the way in which people popularly process this any conflict is the way things happen. I mean, this is a much more complicated behind the scenes, coalition building and coordination with allies. So I think that it's difficult to say for sure how long this will last, but the several weeks timeline makes sense if you look at it from a military point of view. Um, Again, this is a big country. Uh, Everybody's operating from a limited amount of intelligence, and there are certain goals, battle space goals that have to be achieved. So the first order of business was eliminating the top leadership, the decapitation strike. That's already happened. Now, what the logic of war is, once you do that, the other side is going to retaliate. So what you need to do is to neutralize its ability to, if you will, retaliate and deplete its capability for retaliation. Now that takes time. Obviously, in the beginning, you have, the suppression of enemy air defenses approach, which is in the initial stages, but it's limited. But now I think we're in that phase where they're trying to eliminate the ability of the Iranians to retaliate. The next stage that we're going to get into, which is the big one, is to take out command and control structures. And the target will be the IRGC, because the IRGC is the center of gravity of this regime. They're not going to eliminate all of them, but they're going to eliminate enough to where compel the other side to come to the table. So war is politics by other means, okay, as the famous saying goes. Uh, it's not an end unto itself. You don't wage war for the sake of war. You wage war because you could not achieve something through on the negotiating table. But you do come back to the negotiating table. Just look at what happened in May last year between India and Pakistan. War broke out, but then you would go back to the negotiating table, whether that it's not a physical table, but it's a metaphor for where the space in which you actually negotiate. And I would say that those conversations are never shut down. Those conversations continue throughout. And in fact, the conversations, as I just referenced earlier, the Iranian foreign minister acknowledged this, that even during the 12-day war, we were in conversation. I was on the phone with Steve Witkoff, the president's special envoy. And so the idea is to compel the other side to say, hey, let's get to a deal. Let's not take this further. Okay. You think you don't have to give up. Because what is happening is the Iranians think that they can absorb this shock. They don't have to. I'm talking about the June war last year, that they thought that they would face another wave just like June, and it wouldn't be something major. So the escalation happens. You ratchet it up a couple of notches or several notches, and then you say, okay, now are you ready to negotiate? So I think that is the pathway forward. I don't have a timeline because there's so many variables that we're not aware of. I don't think that the White House knows, how long it will take, because once the shooting starts, the battle space has its own logic. It takes a life of its own. You cannot control it. There's just so many things that are spinning on different frequencies of wavelengths that you cannot bring them together. It takes time. So I think that that's sort of the pathway moving forward. I mean, look, in many ways, Pakistan is doing the same thing that the US was doing before this latest war began, is we don't want to go there. So don't do something that will force us to go there. So, and here is the clash of imperatives. So the imperative of this regime was that it did not want to surrender its nuclear program. The imperative of the United States is you cannot have nuclear weapons. And there's no way to guarantee that if you have a nuclear program that you will not get nuclear weapons. The idea that you can enrich at 3.67% and then not one day cross the Rubicon and become a nuclear weapon state is just not practical. So, and if you have a lack of trust, because what the Obama administration did with the JCPOA in 2015 was based on a certain level of trust. And there were many flaws with that agreement, which is why the president at the time knew that he had to do this by executive order because he will not have the votes in the Senate to ratify it, making it a treaty. It never became a treaty because of concerns, and not concerns on the Republican side only, within his own party, the Democratic Party at the time. So Pakistan is in the same situation right now. That look, our imperative is we have an SMDA with Saudi Arabia. It's an our ally. You are attacking our ally. Now, right now, there's no need to jump the gun. But if you go down this path, then we will be forced. Don't force us to go there. That's exactly the same language that President Trump has been using. Say, look, bad things will happen if you do not come to the table. If you do not do X, then bad things will happen. Same thing the Pakistani leadership is saying to the Iranians, bad things will happen. We will be forced to come in because it's our ally. But the Iranians are in their own logic. So if you look at it from their point of view, they're under heavy bombardment. So they have to retaliate. Where will they retaliate? They can't attack the United States too far. They can try to attack certain US assets. Where are they in these countries? And then, of course, they also want to attack the countries themselves to basically force them to compel the United States to bring an end to this war. So again, objective imperatives of different actors colliding. It's not like people are subjectively gravitating towards conflict or peace. There's a certain logic that is beyond any leadership's control because it depends on many leaderships that have different interests.